Dear students, Vanakkam. In this class, you are going to learn a new type of standard costing. Already, you have learned material variance, labor variance in the standard costing, and now the new one is overhead variance. Actually, there are four types of variance in the beginning itself. The theory portion I explained about the type of standard costing, material variance, labor variance, overhead variance, sales variance like. So, on this way, you are going to learn this new model. Okay. The variable overheads and fixed overheads. There are two categories under this overhead variances. Okay, so in which the variable overhead portion is going to be learned on this class. Okay, shall we proceed to problem and solution? Are you ready to learn the new model? Okay, then you follow the problem first. ABC Company Limited used standard costing system in their business firm. The result of the system is given below for the year ending March 2018. You are advised to calculate the variable overhead cost variance, variable overhead expenditure variance, and variable overhead efficiency variance from the below available data. Okay, let me say that in Tamil. ABC Company Limited வந்து ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் காஸ்டிங் வந்து அந்த மெத்தடை அவங்க பிஸ்னஸ் ஃபார்முக்கு யூஸ் பண்ணுறாங்க. அதிலிருந்து அவங்களுக்கு கிடைக்கிற இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் அல்லது டேட்டா ரிசல்ட் என்ன அப்படின்னு அது எந்த பீரியடுக்குன்னா மார்ச் 2018 எண்டிங்கானது. ஓகே, ஸோ இருக்க இன்ஃபர்மேஷனை யூஸ் பண்ணி 3 கேட்டகரி ரிசல்ட்டை வந்து கண்டுபிடிக்க சொல்கிறாங்க. தட் இஸ் வேரியபிள் ஓவர்ஹெட் காஸ்ட் வேரியன்ஸ், தட் இஸ் ஃபர்ஸ்ட். வேரியபிள் ஓவர்ஹெட் எக்ஸ்பெண்டிச்சர் வேரியன்ஸ் இஸ் செகண்ட், அண்ட் தென் வேரியபிள் ஓவர்ஹெட் எஃபிஷியன்சி வேரியன்ஸ். ஸோ இந்த 3 ஃபார்முலாவுக்கு ரிசல்ட் கால்குலேட் பண்ண சொல்லி ரெக்வஸ்ட் பண்ணுறாங்க. ஓகே, ஸோ see the below table information, particulars, budgeted or standard, then actual. Particulars: variable overhead value for the budget or standard is 60,000 and the actual 85,000. Output in units, that is 10,000 units for standard, 11,000 units for actual. Then working hours for the budgeted is 30,000 hours, then actual 25 hours. Okay, so these are the information provided by the company. Okay, so by using this we have to go for working of the solution. Okay, are you clear about this problem? Okay, then before going for solution, just let's see the formula. Okay, there are 3 things that we have to calculate, so for which I have given here the formula. One is variable overhead cost variance. The formula is recovered variable overhead minus actual variable overhead. See that before this model, nowhere else I have given in colors for the formula, because the formula is there, we have to substitute the value in the formula. Okay, that's why I didn't differentiate any formula. But in this model I have given colors because we have to go for working note for the formula. Okay, even the before that, like revised standard quantity, revised standard time, like we prepared the working note. Okay, but here we have to do the workings for the formula and in subdivision like. So here recovered variable overhead is given as a green in color. See the working note below. To find the recovered variable overhead, we have to do that actual output into budgeted variable overhead rate per unit. Actually, actual output is there in the problem. The value is there. So that means we have to calculate the variable overhead rate per unit. So that's why it is marked as a red in color. So how to calculate? Variable overhead rate per unit is equal to budgeted variable overhead divided by budgeted output. Okay, so this is how we have to calculate the recovered variable overhead. Okay, and then deduct the actual variable overhead for the first formula. Then let me go to the variable overhead expenditure variance, the second formula. The formula is standard variable overhead minus actual variable overhead. So here also the actual variable overhead, no change in color, but that means the value is available. That means we have to calculate, do the working note for standard variable overhead. So below the working note, see the second one in green color, standard variable overhead, actual hours worked into budgeted variable overhead rate per hour. So this is what we have to calculate. But actual hours worked is there in the problem. The value is given. So that means we have to calculate variable overhead rate per hour. So that's why I given in red in color. Variable overhead rate per hour is equal to budgeted variable overhead divided by budgeted hours. Okay, so after calculating this, we have to substitute this standard variable overhead in the variable overhead expenditure variance formula. Okay, so formula A and B is over. Then C, variable overhead efficiency variances. Okay, here recovered variable overhead that is already calculated in the A. Then minus standard variable overhead. So this value is also calculated already in the formula B under the variable overhead expenditure variance. So that means when we prepared the A and B, then C becomes very easy to calculate. So this is the formula structure. Now let's see the solution. First one, variable overhead cost variance. Variable overhead cost variance is the formula. So we have to solve recovered variable overhead minus actual variable overhead. As I explained in the formula session, see that recovered variable overhead is given in a green color. So for which I working note, recovered variable overhead. So formula is actual output into budgeted variable overhead rate per unit. Again you leave the actual output, so don't worry about. But take this variable overhead rate per unit, that's given as red color. Budgeted variable overhead divided by budgeted output. Budgeted variable overhead given in the problem is 60,000 divided by budgeted output 10,000. Okay, it's given as rupees. So when dividing, we get rupees 6 per unit. Okay, so this is what the value of variable overhead rate per unit, rupees 6. Now apply with the working note, recovered variable overhead. Actual output is there 11,000 into variable overhead rate per unit, that is 6 per unit. So 11,000 to 6, 66,000. It is the recovered variable overhead. Now go back to the actual solution. Variable overhead cost variance, that is recovered variable overhead 66,000 minus actual variable overhead, it is there given as 85,000. That means rupees 19,000. Here the value is adverse because 66,000 minus 85,000. That means the 85,000 is the biggest value. It comes as minus. So the result of this formula is adverse. Okay. Okay, then let's move to next formula. Variable overhead expenditure variance. The formula is standard variable overhead minus actual variable overhead. See this different. The standard variable overhead given is green in color. Now we have to find the value for the standard variable overhead. So below that working note I have given. Standard variable overhead is equal to actual hours worked into budgeted variable overhead rate per hour. Okay, so actual hours worked is there in the problem, so need not to go for calculation. The budgeted variable overhead rate per hour, so see that it is red in color, so calculated the value, that is budgeted variable overhead divided by budgeted hours. Budgeted variable overhead value is 60,000 rupees and budgeted hours, that is 30,000 hours. So that means 2 per hour, that is rupees 2 per hour we get as a variable overhead rate per hour. So now this value is to be applied in the standard variable overhead. So actual hours worked 25,000 hours into variable overhead rate per hour we calculated as rupees 2. So that means the total standard variable overhead value is rupees 50,000. Now this value is to be applied in the formula. Okay, so that is standard variable overhead is rupees 50,000 minus actual variable overhead rupees 85,000. So when deducting we get rupees 35,000. Here also we get adverse value. Okay, adverse value. So why? See that the minus value, that is 85,000 is the biggest value or higher value. So when we deduct this we get the adverse. So that means the variable overhead expenditure variance is rupees 35,000 as adverse we have got. Okay, shall we proceed to the next formula? The third one is variable overhead efficiency variance. Variable overhead efficiency variance is equal to recovered variable overhead minus standard variable overhead. Okay, so this is what we have to calculate here. Already explained in the formula session that once you calculate recovered variable overhead and standard variable overhead, variable overhead efficiency variance is easy to calculate. So accordingly, see that recovered variable overhead is 66,000 minus standard variable overhead is rupees 50,000. How we get? See the below note, working note, that is first working note from solution A for recovered variable overhead. So from A we have taken the 66,000. Then second one, working note from solution B for standard variable overhead. So for the standard variable overhead, from the second working note we have taken the value. Okay, so that is given as a note. So finally we get the value is rupees 16,000 favor. So that means recovered variable overhead is only 66,000, but the standard variable overhead only 50,000. That means the positive value is higher value. So when we deduct this we get favor. So finally we get the variable overhead efficiency variance is as rupees 16,000 favor. Okay. Okay, you please take a minute, go through fast manner, step by step, while going through on your own. If you get any doubt, you please raise. Otherwise, if you require, I may give a review. Okay, are you clear? Don't you have any doubt? Will you do the preparation on your own? Okay. Okay, then I feel happy that you have no doubt in this part. So you see that though it is a different model, the method of calculation are almost same, but the thing what is different, only you have to see that in a deep manner, and you have to focus more on the different part of the problem. Okay, so if you see the difference in each and every problem and each and every type of sum, definitely you can learn well. Okay, so with this let me conclude this class. Okay, then let's meet with a new sum in the next class. Okay, until then, thank you.